Wow, it's my favorite YouTuber.
Hi everyone, my name is Dana. Welcome back to my channel. Today we will be continuing on with our Enneagram series videos. So today is going to be the Enneagram 4 video. As you'll notice, I don't have my guest here with me today. We are actually going to be Zooming with them in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to come on and do a little bit of an intro, let you know we'll be talking about Enneagram 4 today, and also just let you know that if you are interested in seeing any of the other Enneagram numbers, you can check those videos out on my channel. They're on a little playlist on the front page, so feel free to check it out there. And other than that, I think we're gonna sign on to Zoom and meet up with our Enneagram 4 that we're gonna talk to today. This is Brian. Brian, do you wanna go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm a type 4. I am
Yes, okay.
roommate, fiance's twin brother.
Okay, so as you guys can see, we had to kind of go quite a bit down the line. So I was actually unable to find any 4s who were willing to come on and record with me. So Brian is going to record with me. He is an Enneagram 4, but he does have a lot of interactions with other Enneagram 1s. So I think he'll be able to give a pretty good perspective on the Enneagram 1 and 4 relationship. First, do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about the Enneagram 4s?
Well, type 4s, they tend to be emotional. A lot of the decisions are emotion-based. Okay. The root insecurity is that you feel like insignificant and that you need to kind of be special in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to be that special person. You want to be different than everyone else. And I think, growing up, like I have a twin brother, right? So like I would always just try to separate myself from him somehow. Like when we dressed the same way, I'd be always the person to just go back in and change clothes, because a lot of how we derive self-worth comes from how people perceive us as like being different, whether it's like how you look or your personality or whatever. That's why a lot of type 4s tend to be creative, but yeah.
That makes sense. The type 4 is called the individualist, so I feel like that makes sense. How much would you say that you like relate with the 4? So like on a scale of like 1 to 10?
It's pretty up there. It's pretty up there. Maybe like, 8 or 9 out of 10.
How much do you know about the Enneagram 1?
A little bit, because there's certain people in my life, right, that are also type 1s, like my mom.
Okay, so then on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the compatibility of a 1 and a 4?
It's definitely interesting, because definitely polar opposites ways of viewing the same situation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm a 1, and so that's kind of why we're talking about the 1-4 relationship overall. But I feel like I find that for me, the 4s are like probably the hardest Enneagram for me to like understand their perspective generally. So then I don't know if that's like across the board for all 1s. We'll get a little bit more into like the details of it later. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to be using the Enneagram Institute. They have a section on their website that talks about some of the positives and the negatives between a 1 and a 4 relationship. So I'm going to read through some of those, and then I'll kind of break at certain points, and then we can kind of talk about if we agree or disagree with those points. So, for some of the positives, it says Enneagram 1s and 4s have an intense mutual interest to bring something good and beautiful into the world. 1s bring a desire for objectivity, truth, value, and reason to the friendship. 1s can act as valuable sounding boards for 4s, offering advice and wisdom when 4s get confused by the multitude of their feelings or their self-doubts. 4s bring creativity, intense feelings, sensuality, spontaneity, inspiration, and the ability to tap into dreams, the unconscious, and their universal forces. Their expressiveness and emotionality can be a welcome counterbalance to the 1's typical formality and sense of order and reason.
Like 100% agree with everything that was said. One thing this is super random, but I think one thing that hit me was, even though it was difficult being raised by my mom, because I feel like we just have naturally different tendencies since she's the 1. But now I'm starting to realize, like, I'm kind of thankful that I was raised by her. If she did not have those set disciplines and kind of that logical approach towards a lot of the things in life, I don't think I would go very far in life. So I think there was a part where you're talking about how 1s approach things with structure, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm starting to appreciate that a lot, because I think I definitely don't have a tendency towards that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think the 1 and the 4, while they do approach things so differently, and it can be, I think, a source of maybe conflict, I think it can also bring them both to the middle a little bit, because I think, like it was saying, 1s I think do typically tend to approach things with a lot of structure, or a lot of like, you know, this plus this will equal this, and then that's how it should go, that's how the plan should work. I think for myself, for a while I met up with a girl and she was a 4, and I think that kind of hearing her kind of talk through her problems or like ways of thinking, I definitely was challenged in trying to learn how to empathize a little bit more. I think for a 1, a lot of our like struggle can come from having like really high expectations of people, and when those expectations aren't met, I think we can get really like critical of those things. And so I think because we think in such a like structural like order, I think sometimes when other people like aren't on that same page, it's easy to be like, well, why? But that being said, I feel like, you know, emotions are not a bad thing. But I think for a 1, sometimes you can like feel like they're a bad thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of my interactions with my mom are like that. She has those high expectations for me growing up, and it was hard to feel like she actually like loved me, because this is the question I want to ask you. How do 1s like feel loved? Because for a type 4, like feel like you're loved is when people listen to you and take the time to understand how you're feeling and how you approach what you're doing and why you feel a certain way. Not necessarily like you need to like help them through it. It's just like to listen to them and to like feel them, you know. But my mom never did that growing up, because I think she has that mindset where it's like, these are the standards, like I love you and supporting you, meeting those standards. But I think she never really understood that you know, I feel loved when you just want to sit and like just let me talk through like how I'm feeling. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting because the way you like describe that, I think has been part of my like struggles with relationships with 4s, is that sometimes I feel like I'm like showing them love or care, but it doesn't feel like they're like receiving it. For me to like feel loved, I think, okay, so 1's like core fear is that they're like not good, or they're like morally wrong or bad. And so I think for 1s it can be really easy to jump to this like sense of self-criticism. So if I mess up or something doesn't go the way it's supposed to be planned, I think I can like jump from, oh, this didn't work out, to like, oh, it didn't work out because I'm like a failure, or I'm wrong, or I'm not doing well enough. And then you start spiraling on that kind of. And so I think that for me, when I feel most loved is when people are able to kind of like affirm you. It's hard for me to see like maybe the positive in what I did, or the places where maybe I did excel, because I'm so harsh on myself. And so I think having those like words of affirmation like from someone else who can see that is a way that I personally feel loved. And then I also feel like acts of service, just because I think 1s can be very practical in nature. For example, like I really appreciate when people like try to be on time, whereas like other people might not as much, I guess.
I'm like taking notes so that I could apply this for my mom. I really care about her and love her, right? But then, you know, I honestly don't know the most optimal way to do so.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a learning process, just in like understanding how people receive love. Because like I was telling you, I think a struggle in the past has been like when I'm like trying to care for another 4, I feel like they often like aren't like feeling that love. And I think to me, like if I go into like a conversation where someone's like struggling with something, my like logical approach is like, oh, I want them to not be struggling with this. So in what way can we do that? So like let's evaluate, okay, what's the heart issue, or what's the core issue with this, and like how do we like move forward from it, and practically like change this in our life. But then I think what I like had to learn and had to realize was like not everyone wants to like jump straight there, and to some people that can feel very like harsh, when they just need like a minute to like talk about it, or like feel heard, or like feel empathized with. I'm curious, like what positive, because I now after talking to you, I realize all the positive impacts like my mom has had on me. So now I'm curious, like if I had any positive impacts on my mom
in terms
should
of
ask
like
her.
being a 4?
No, I think genuinely, I think that the ability to empathize was something that I was really challenged with in my like relationships with 4s. Like I was saying earlier, I feel like I can really be so like maybe cold when people like come to me with problems because it is really like in my head, like the best way to help them is to like help them to change from that. And I think that that's not like what we're called to do, even like biblically, right? Like we're called to like weep with those who weep. That is like part of being able to like live life with someone, is to be able to like empathize. At least for me with my relationships with 4s, I think that that's something I was like really challenged in. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of the negative attributes and then we can talk about that. A friendship between 1s and 4s can sometimes be like mixing oil and water. They tend to separate quickly because they see things from opposite points of view. 1s think that they're almost always sensible and objective, while 4s do not try to be objective. They want to see things from the subjective, personal side. So 1s can begin to see 4s as hopelessly emotional, self-absorbed, and self-indulgent, while 4s can start to see the 1 as insufferably rigid, judgmental, and cold.
It's extreme, but it's kind of accurate because, you know, that water and oil like kind of imagery, there's just a lot of disconnect sometimes in how we address each other and expectations.
Yeah, I feel like with the 1 and 4 pairing, it can definitely be like a challenge for me, at least. Another like, I guess, thing to think about is that the 1 in their like most negative state actually goes towards a 4. So their stress arrow is towards the 4. And so I think it's interesting because the 1 being that their like core fear is that they're like morally bad. And when they're stressed, they're taking on the negative attributes of the 4, right? Because we're so like self-aware and self-critical, I think it's easy to like view those attributes as like very negative. And so when I myself like veer towards my 4, I think I'm like very critical of those emotions or those like character traits that come out. And so then I think it's easy for me to like generalize other 4s and be like, oh, like they're just like unaware of their emotions, or they're just, you know, emotionally driven.
I'm curious, is it that like the 1s are usually like so structured and stuff that like your emotions are like almost like repressed, so then when it's like you're in a negative state and like all of it just comes out?
I think so.
I don't know.
I genuinely think so. Lastly, do you feel like there's anything that you want the world to know about the Enneagram 4?
Listen to your type 4 friends. I think something that usually when you ask for like your type 4 friends, like how they're doing or what's on their mind, they'll usually give like a short answer sometimes. I don't know, this is for me because sometimes nothing hurts more when you say something and you start expressing your thoughts and feelings and the other person kind of is like, okay, that's cool, and then moves on. Mm-hmm. So if you really want to show love to your type 4 friends, always ask like how they're doing, and don't just leave it at like one question, but just keep asking, you know, like, why do you feel that way and why do you think like that? I honestly, that's one of the best like things I appreciate about the friends that I have, is when they have the ability to listen to me. And yeah, I think that's what really helped me grow a lot, is in like life, is just when people took the time to listen to me and help me process through all the emotions. There's so much beauty, I think, in like the dynamics between a 1 and 4, because we're just so different. And I think it just really exposes like our need for like the gospel, because, you know, a lot of my friends I wouldn't be friends with because, you know, everyone has like their flaws and their misperceptions and stuff, but I think the beauty is when we can all come together and we have that spirit working in us. For some other people who think a lot differently than me, there's moments where we try to work things out, and it's not until like sometimes we have to give it up to the Lord, and that's when all these differences are the gaps are bridged. So man, it's kind of neat. It's kind of neat, the church, and how there's so many different perspectives and personality types and how they come together.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think you're very right in that I think it also has brought to light like the differences in how people maybe view the world or view more surface level things. And, you know, at the root of it, the gospel really is what drives us together and what brings us even that ability to like want to love someone with such a different perspective than us. I think that is all that we have for today. So Brian, thank you for joining me for this installment of my Enneagram series. Other than that, I will see you guys next week, where we'll be talking about the relationship between an Enneagram type 1 and a type 3. And go ahead and leave a comment down below and let me know if you have any Enneagram type friend 4s and what your favorite thing about them is. And I will see you guys next week. Bye guys. Okay, did you read the stuff I sent over?
Yeah. Wait, what is that? Sounds like a dog.
I'm just...
Bye.
Bye.